Hey everyone. So for this month in June, we're talking about the work behind uncomfortable conversations. And we're going to distill it into a bite-sized chunk for our leadership toolkit. Because in the realm of well-being, things can get so overwhelming that you don't implement anything. It's like decision paralysis or indecision, right? So we're just paralyzed by all of the choices. Now, the reason why I want to talk about uncomfortable conversations is a few things. Oftentimes, an uncomfortable conversation or an awkward conversation is this massive barrier between you and what it is that you want. Whether it's at home or whether it's in the workplace, if we can remove this boulder, which is standing in the way of you getting what you want in the moment, in your life, in your relationship, in your career, and you get so good at this skill that these boulders no longer really exist. Because when they're small, like a rock that you can hold in your hand, you've become very adept at recognizing that rock and the weight that if it grows, you carry. And so you remove this rock before it comes into a boulder. So I want you to think about something or some things in your life that you feel like you're being held back, whether it's promotion, whether it's deeper intimacy in your personal relationship, feeling a sense of belonging with your colleagues, or feeling like people see you and hear you. Whether you're in a place of what we call true well-being or pseudo well-being or poor well-being, meaning if you're really, really struggling, if circumstantially things are okay and therefore you are okay, or if genuinely you do the life work that we discuss so frequently within personal and professional development, that your well-being is a bit more of a constant undercurrent. But nevertheless, in all of these different categories and all of these different walks of life and situations and states of being, there are conversations that we need to have with people in our lives that would benefit us. And it would benefit them if we could just have that conversation in a really tactful way, in a really mindful way that fosters deeper connection, builds resilience, enhances confidence, underlines belonging and intimacy and connection, and it breeds this environment of safety. And that's what we in our jobs and in our homes want is security and safety. And we don't want to be driven so much by the fear of loss. Rather, what I would encourage people to do is to flip the script and to be mindful about what it is that is holding you back. And if that fear of loss is the reason why you're not having the uncomfortable conversation, just for a moment to, like Albert would do, is have this thought experiment of what if instead of losing something by having the uncomfortable conversation, in fact, you get to this other side of the rainbow, if you will, where it's the opposite of loss, it's gain. You've gained something through the conversation. And sometimes that resilience, that strength that is generated through having that conversation alone with your partner, with your boss, with your colleagues, that will bond you. It will. It will release the chemicals that we need to create bonding in our brains and create friendships and deeper relationships through this shared awkwardness and struggle, because resilience is this ability to come out stronger, to adapt to what's happening in the new, to adapt what's happening in the now, and to come out stronger than when you went in. So if we look at the pandemic and the way that organizations operated, some adopted new procedures, protocols, and even tech that facilitated client and patient care, facilitated work for employees. And I'm so curious, but how many people are going to continue using those new resources, or the resources they didn't know were there until we were forced to find them in the future and in the now? And so if we think about your relationships in that same way, if you know that there's a colleague who's struggling, if there's someone who's raised a flag in your gut, you're like, man, I wonder if they're okay. And you don't ask because you're worried about this awkward conversation. The interesting thing is that it doesn't have to be so awkward. It doesn't have to be this massive thing that we build up in our minds, so much so that it doesn't get done. Rather, hey man, how you doing? I know da 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 happened, and I'm just curious, like, how have you been feeling? That's the start of something more. And yeah, it takes some skill. And I don't mean to say these questions in a way that they're perceived as being rhetorical, like you're walking in and out of, the grocery store. I mean, you could, if you really stop and step aside to where the person really knows that you are genuinely interested in how they're doing. But I hope that you know what I mean by it's not just a, hey, how are you? Like, that's not what it is, because the response to that is going to be like, fine, right? And what do I always say fine stands for? Freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional, right? So I don't want people to ask rhetorical, questions like that, but really find a moment, create a moment to where you can ask and that it be perceived as genuine, and you just hold this space for them. But we also have to ask for help in our own lives. And if you're a leader who's listening to this, I encourage you to go first especially in your organization, because that level of ask, that level of openness, that level of potentially, vulnerability, that is going to pave the way for other people to feel safe in doing the same thing. If the environment, the culture in your hospital is so toxic that people do not feel safe in asking for help if they have a question, or if they feel like they've made a mistake, or if they need to double check something, then the high quality standard of patient care or even job satisfaction will degrade. And so if your leaders in your hospitals are recognizing that they need a help in certain areas, and you can start small. It doesn't have to be like with the biggest, most, top secret responsibility that you have. It can be something relatively, something that people can help you with, right? Something that other people can take on as a responsibility. But to know that you are a human and we are rehumanizing our workplaces in a way that doesn't treat employees, and it doesn't even treat leadership. It doesn't matter what role you're in, it doesn't treat people like machines, right? That in fact, we do matter. In fact, you matter. In fact, they matter. That you are invested in who they are as a person. Do they feel confident in their human skills? Do they feel confident in their personal skills? Because if you are invested in your people in a holistic way, it means more than just their clinical skills. It means more than just their workplace, we'll say, hard skills. There's so much intangible human skills that goes into this art of being a successful professional and human in our line of work, but in any line of work, in any line of being, because these things are directly tied. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that came out of the pandemic, was that we recognized as a culture how intricate our lives really are weaved together. So if we're not putting resources, and by resources I mean time, energy, awareness, potentially dollars, into supporting people in the best ways possible, then it's a no-brainer that you would have maybe a toxic culture. So I ask you to just begin thinking about some of these different ways in which you can invest in your people on a really human level, not so much on the employee level, because I think most people who are listening to this probably are doing a fairly stellar job at investing in their employees. But if you're not, if you feel like there's some new way that you haven't been able to invest in your employees, maybe it's through a well-being program, maybe it's mental health services, whatever the case might be. But if there's a way that you can invest in them to grow the confidence that they need to perform at a higher level, do so. But also do so for their human skills, right? So in this context, if we're talking about veterinary professionals and you have new trainees or senior or veteran, support staff, or veterinarians who, all of these different chapters in life, they need support and mentorship and growth within their clinical skills and environment, and experience varieties of, what they're able to get their hands in, but also there are different chapters of life that they need skills in to help them feel less anxiety, less resentment, less negative energy when they're walking through the doors of your hospital. So when you're going to do this exercise, these exercises are the tip of the iceberg to just get the gears turning. And we're going to flush some stuff out. We're going to flush out what types of conversations are needing to be had that you've been maybe avoiding. There's a lot of, there's two. There's two mantras or schools of thought, philosophies, whatever you want to call it, that I think of often. And one of them is the big domino. What's the big domino that's going to knock over all the other dominoes? And the second one is eat the frog. And they both mean the same thing, right? Is that what is the big thing that you need to do that day that you've been avoiding, but it would really snowball and make a lot of other things smoother, easier, faster, more efficient, bring you more money, create that connection, whatever, right? So what are the conversations that you need to have? Flush some of those out. And as a team, get together and talk about some of these things that people are feeling. Honor the experiences that they have together. I just watched Jaws for my 10-year-old actually. We watched Jaws together. I know, right? Like, I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion or not, but he's been begging to watch it for months. And I'm confident that I was the same age as he was when I watched it, which I'm also confident that I was scarred for life, but he's more resilient than I am. But nevertheless, we watched Jaws for the first time just a couple weeks ago. And I always thought it was funny, the moment where they were comparing scars and they were swapping stories about how they got those scars. And when I was his age, I think I was actually younger. Maybe that was the reason, but I made this joke with the kids that I was watching it with. I was like, yeah, check this one out. Like, I got into it with a mosquito, and it got me. 8-year-old humor, but that humor, gallows humor, this experience that you have together, vet med is, it's effing hard, okay? It is tough. It is provocative. It is, sometimes you're going to get your ass handed to you. Sometimes you feel like you've been hit by a Mack truck. Sometimes you feel like you've been beaten up. Sometimes you feel like you're in the foxhole. And I mean that with deep respect to our military, but you feel like you're in this foxhole when you're going on 13 hours and another emergency walks in and you're not an emergency clinic, right? You're general practice. And just because they saw the lights on, they're like, oh, I've got a pyometra too. Like, do you just want to do a second one tonight? And right, like, it can really take its toll. And so when you create this space for people to go through it and process it, metabolize it together. I don't mean in the moment of the ER and then to go home to spouses who don't know what it's like, that's not the same thing, because they don't know what it's like. And so I remember reading the Culture Code. If you haven't read the Culture Code, you should read it. But one of the best NFL coaches of all time, they had a crappy game, and at dinner, they all went to dinner afterwards. And instead of, schooling them and kind of giving them like, this is the moment for the learning lesson, he didn't. He just let them all sit down and let them organically just open up and talk about the night, and talk about the hard stuff, and talk about the stuff that, now they could laugh at. But just creating that space to really go through it, create this space for people to offer moments of confidence and build each other up, because most of the time we're not talking about those things. We don't take the time to stop and say, Shannon, I just wanted to let you know what you did with that kitten earlier was spectacular. Like, the ability to do X, Y, or Z really changed the, the experience for me, really changed the experience for the kitten, really changed the experience for the positive for the client, whatever it is. Like, you just did that. Thank you so much for bringing me those blankets that spared me time that I didn't have from leaving my anesthetized patient. You say that to your kennel staff, but stop and actually, like, thank you for thinking of me. Thank you for, just build confidence in each other. Share the struggles, honor the experiences that people are going through, express humor in this shared work. Because I'll tell you, I've even done work I volunteered with a hospice for months. And that, to outsiders, it seems unethical, immoral. I don't know what to call it. Just, it would seem cold if they were to look in and see any sense of humor around a deeply, we'll say dark experience, traumatic, maybe it's euthanasia, maybe it's an emergency, whatever the case is, right? But that type of humor, it's in these different industries, whether you're practicing law, you're a nurse, you're a vet technician, you're in first responders, you're police, you're in the military, like, those are the things that without that, and I do believe that even Dr. Barry Feldman talks about this, and I think it's the compassion fatigue course that's on GMU. I could have that wrong, but he talks about the importance of that humor and releasing the stresses that build up from the type of caregiver work that many humans are involved in. Okay, so I want you guys to know that, and to also create this space that you can rest together. Now, this is an unpopular opinion. As a leader, I appreciate the work ethic that is cultivated over time by if there's time to lean, there's time to clean mentality. I was raised on it, and I believe that it has served me very well. But when we stop looking at employees, when we stop looking at staff members, when you stop looking at your support staff as numbers producers, when that stops happening, and that they just had a week of hell, or they've had a day of hell, and then you move to, all right, it's the last hour of the day. There's two options, right? You either keep busting your ass, or you maybe downshift and go, okay, what's the bare minimum that we need to do so that we can close up shop and it not be like a tornado, and B, still breathe, right? Still breathe while we're at work, not once you leave work, you get to breathe, but while you're at work. Or if it's the week from heck and Sunday comes and you've got a one doctor day and you've got half a booked schedule and I don't know, a third of them canceled, whatever. What do you do? Options are, right? You can clean, you can reorganize, you can restock, and maybe that's needed. Maybe it takes up a part of the day. But what if you just breathe? What if in those moments, these innocuous moments where there's not all of these distractions, where your people get to talk to each other, where your people get to confide in one another, where your people get to build each other up, where your people get to talk about what's going on in their lives. If they're going a million miles an hour from sun up to sundown, do they get to talk about the fact that they're caring for their elderly parent? Do they get to talk about the divorce that they're going through? Do they get to talk about the new baby? Do they get to talk about, the new car that they got? Like, whatever it is, heavy or light, do they get to talk about these things? Do they get to generate moments where they can bond with each other? Do they potentially, maybe they talk about a common enemy? Maybe they talk about the Karen of that week. Maybe they, I don't encourage that. I encourage people to try and bond over positive things, which it can happen. You can still release oxytocin from, positive positive sharing, and that's what I encourage. Like man, I've been through enough days where people come in and they like try to one up each other on the crappy thing that happened to them the day before, the weekend before, the thing that their husband did. Ugh, not for me. Like, it just creates this negative, you can almost see it like a gray cloud in the air where people are just, and that's the stuff, right? They don't recognize that negativity is really what's creating their low productivity at work, but it is. And so if you flip the script, if you use it for the focus on what people are grateful for, if you focus on what are, people growing in, then it creates a very uplifting atmosphere, a very light atmosphere. And that feeds into, oh, I'm going to go in this room. Hey, I'll take that case off your shoulders. Hey, I'll take that phone call, because that's that's the thing, right? Like, that's the energy that we're carrying into every single case, into every single interaction with each other. So I digress. I wanted to give you some context because as I was creating this 2-sheet, I realized that this is a topic of importance, and it's more than just a 2-sheeter. It's more than just a 1-sheeter, but I think it's important to have some nugget-sized things that you can implement. If you listen to this on the way into work and then you take a look at the sheet, and then you sit down and you go, okay, let's get these gears turning. And then as those gears turn, you see the results immediately in people, in your practice. And then you go, okay, what's, how do we further that? But you start where you are. So if you guys have questions, as always, we're here. If you want us to elaborate on anything, we're here. And I hope that by having some conversations like this, you don't find that your employees quit over not feeling appreciated or not getting a pay raise. And, because that will happen, right? They're so scared of having a conversation with their boss because they're not taught. We're not taught these skills in formal education. So teaching your employees communication skills. Like that would be one of those investments that I had talked about earlier. And whether you consider it a human skill or a hard skill for their jobs, either way, I don't, it doesn't, I don't know that it really matters. The fact of the matter is that communication skills are required and necessary in building in both professional and personal environments. So, but just know that these kinds of conversations can help you retain an employee. They can help you save a marriage. They can help you save a life. Dr. Barry Feldman does talk about that in his suicide prevention course with us, is that a simple conversation, simple, but potentially uncomfortable, right? If you've never done it before and you're worried about someone, it can be awkward, it can be uncomfortable, but by having that conversation and by using the phrases that he talks about, by using the technique that he talks about, it becomes 10 times less uncomfortable and it can really help someone. So, and here's the thing, it can help you. It can help you. If you need help, if you need to exercise different boundaries, if you need to renegotiate boundaries that you already had established, it can really help you get what you want out of your day, out of your life. Know that. It's just a conversation. But what's on the other side of that is the transformation, is the bliss, is whatever it is that you're wanting. Okay? Know that.